All right, welcome everybody to our LGBTQ plus Civil Rights Town Hall. Thank you for being here. I know this is not the sexiest topic to spend your weekday evening at, and you're all out here to be able to learn more about civil rights here in both the city of Pittsburgh, but also in the greater region. If you all don't know me, I'm Ray Smith. I am honored and privileged to be the current board chair of the Pittsburgh Equality Center. We were founded in 1979 as basically a support line to help folks in need. And we have done that for the past 46, going on 47 years. We have done all kinds of things, from being the former hosts and organizers of Pittsburgh Pride to being the home to many other LGBTQ plus clubs and organizations that have been born out of it. And I would be remiss if I didn't at least acknowledge our current board members here. So if our current and former emeritus board members, if you could all please stand so that you can be acknowledged.
Emeritus.
Thank you. And so feel free to ask any of them questions about Pittsburgh Equality Center. You will sometimes know us as the GLCC, or formerly the Community Center. So I wanted to start off with saying that we are in challenging times, and we see an erosion of free expression in places like our public libraries and constant debates over the rights of our youth and neighbors. It's important that we remember that we have civil rights. This town hall is designed to move us beyond simply knowing your rights to actively broadening them. We're joined here tonight by a group of leaders. First, to my immediate left is Chris Stoult. He's the Deputy Director of the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. Ian Price, who is made a last minute change to his title. Forgive me. The chair of the Pennsylvania Democratic Party LGBTQ plus Caucus. And then we have members of Pittsburgh Mayor O'Connor's LGBTQIA plus Commission, Councilmember Barbara Lick, and then Julian McClain of True T Pittsburgh. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this over to each of them to just take a few minutes to talk about themselves, do further and appropriate introductions of themselves, and then we'll go into formal questions. Then you are all welcome to use those notepads to write your own questions. They'll come up to me and we can go ahead and go through those questions that you might have for the panelists. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Chris, to get us started.
Okay. All right. Hi, everybody. My name is Chris Stoult. I am the Deputy Director for the City of Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations. We are responsible for enforcing all the civil rights codes for the City of Pittsburgh. Right now, we have over 100 active investigations. So as I always tell people, it's not just cosmetic. We actually do things and we can produce results. So that being said, for the first time in probably 10 years this morning, social media actually did something useful for me today. And that I looked on my memory feed and I saw a rebuttal I posted to an article that the New York Times had put out last year on this date, saying that it was transgender ideology that had caused the Democrats' defeat in the 2024 election, and that if they wanted to win in the future, they should back off of that. I think it's an amazing credit to the efforts of everybody in this room and everybody who's watching and all of the folks who are part of this community that we haven't seen that massive retreat from the party that puts themselves out there as the party that defends LGBTQ plus rights. That being said, federally, of course, we're seeing a massive attack coming from the administration in all facets against the rights of queer and trans folks, and of course, people out there more broadly who they just identify as enemies and as convenient punching bags for their ideological leanings. Right now, luckily, our office has the ability to protect folks. We have, our protections are statutory. We don't rely on HUD and the EEOC, because if we didn't rely on HUD and the EEOC, we would be in a lot of trouble right now. As I said. Oh, okay. I thought there was a buzzer. I was like, oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Lightly ignoring.
That's all right. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, because if we did rely upon federal agencies, as frankly a lot of commissions do, for our actual statutory and jurisdictional legal authority, we would be in a lot of trouble right now. And so I want to start off by reassuring everybody we're still here. Both the Commission on Human Relations and our ability to enforce the laws that we do have and protections that we do have, but then, also acknowledge everybody in this room is here, still here more broadly. And by continuing to be here and by continuing to make sure that the folks who say that they stand for these rights, say that they stand for us, have a backbone, we will still be here. So,
Ian?
Hello, my name is Ian Price, and as Ray kindly introduced, I'm the newly elected chair of the State Democratic Party's LGBTQ Caucus. It's understandable, it's only been a month, so I think Ray booked me for this before I actually got the post. I'm always very surprised that I'm in a place of institutional power now, because I came from an activist space where I think a lot of people who might remember sitcoms when they were on network TV. We never thought we would be in places of institutional power. So I'm still surprised all the time, and really my chops are much more in the activism, opposition, and organizer type spaces. As a part of the LGBTQ Caucus, I think my role is still to be a pain in the rear end, because I don't really believe that the Democratic Party is as far along as it needs to be in institutional supporting LGBTQ rights. I think that people are starting to come around. I think they're starting to acknowledge, but I don't think that across the entire state we're there yet. For example, and I know we'll get more questions on that, 4 Democratic senators last year from Central and Eastern PA backed an anti-trans bill, but I think largely due to the efforts of activist groups across Western PA, our Western PA caucus held firm. I was even talking with some people from Philly over the weekend. I think the cops closed down 2 lesbian bars in the past year, something like that. We got the cops in P-Town, and we raised holy heck here. And because I don't think Pittsburgh takes shit, I definitely don't. And locally, I'm president of the Steel City Stonewall Democrats, which is an independent Democratic group, so it's not formally part of the Democratic Party. And our role is to definitely keep pushing our local politicians towards LGBTQ rights, to bring them along, to help them see, and so that they actually meet LGBTQ people. Recently, a few months ago, there was a, let's call him a person, I think we can call him that. He said that to a group of activists that he had never sat down in a room of trans people before. Well, we gave him every opportunity for years. He never showed up. He never showed his face. I think everyone knows what I'm talking about. But he never showed his face. That is on him. After years of being invited into queer and trans spaces, that he had the gall to say, well, he's never been in the room before. That is totally on him, because that's the work that we're doing.
Thank you. Councilmember Warwick.
Yeah, thanks. So, thanks everybody. Oh, there we go. Can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, thanks everybody for being here. My name is Barb Warwick. I'm on Pittsburgh City Council for District 5. I won't go, but I came to City Council through just a community organizing background, right? So local organizing in my own neighborhood, and then also organizing around public transit issues with Pittsburghers for public transit. At any rate, actually pretty shortly after I joined council, we were seeing all these bills, these anti-trans bills getting passed in, states in municipalities all over the country. My team and I almost immediately introduced some legislation that was modeled on legislation that Bobby Wilson had actually introduced around abortion care. And basically it was preemptive, sort of proactively deprioritizing any criminalization of abortion care. That was Bobby Wilson's bill, and we basically just like took that, kind of copy pasted it for gender affirming care. Again, that was very early on, and one thing that I learned through that process was, as a new council member, we really did not do the outreach that we should have, right? We just kind of were like, oh, you know, it was like we were new and we're like, oh, great, they passed this one, that makes sense, let's just do the exact same thing for gender affirming care, easy peasy, right? And it was really interesting because then fast forward, 2 years or so, and we see this issue coming up with the Trump, obviously the re-election of Donald Trump and the UPMC issue, and it had never occurred to us that, because in the first bill, it was very focused, it was focused on the people seeking the care and protecting them against being criminalized, right? And it was also focused on the people providing the care. But it had never occurred to us that the people providing the care would be the ones doing the harm. And I think that if we had done our due diligence and sat down with the community and understood better the landscape, that is something that we might have seen a little bit earlier when we did that first piece of legislation. But anyway, so then fast forward and then working, with lots of folks, Trans Uniting and a number of other groups, we introduced a package of bills. So one together with the Commission on Human Relations. So one was, again, like preemptively deprioritizing. So this one came, I'll give a little background. A constituent came to me, I have office hours in the Hazelwood Library on Fridays, and a constituent came by, and a trans constituent, and they sat down and were just like, I'm very worried because of this idea that, these bills that are getting, passed around the country where I could be criminalized just for being trans. So for example, like what if the law of the land becomes, you can't live within a certain distance of a school because you're, if you're trans. And he's like, and they said that would be my home, like that would impact, so what can we do? So the first goal was to deprioritize crimes based on identity, right? So meaning, if I do, have like a book reading with kids, and it's okay for me to do it, but it's not okay for another person to do the exact same thing just because of their identity, right? So it will deprioritize criminalization of those activities here in Pittsburgh. So, we don't have a lot of power in the city, obviously the feds and the state preempt us. However, we do have power around what we enforce, right? Like what our police do, the crimes that they choose to pursue, right? So that was one piece, and the other piece, working together with Chris and his team, was to add discrimination in medical care to sort of like the charter, so to speak, of the Commission on Human Relations. So, again, we're limited in what we can do. However, if you look at what UPMC was doing, it was saying, you can have this care if you're, if it's not about transitioning, you can have this care, whatever it may be, right? If it's, hormone replacement therapy or whatever kind of treatment. But if you are doing it to transition, you cannot, right? And that is discrimination. And so, we added that to the Commission's charter. And then there was actually a third bill, it's a little bit tangential, but still impacts folks, sort of some of those vulnerable folks in the community and others, is that we passed a bill to reduce the minimum penalty for consensual sex work in the city of Pittsburgh. So before, if you were, arrested for consensual sex work, it was a minimum of thousands of dollars in fines and also potential jail time. And that, of course, doesn't help anyone. It doesn't keep anyone safe. It's certainly not a penalty that was applied to the customer. So we reduced that minimum penalty to basically just a summary violation, basically like a ticket. And the folks we worked with on that are the same folks, Teresa Nightingale, who did a lot of work around the decriminalization of marijuana use as well. And we sort of mirrored that legislation. So lots of good work done, by my team and by all the folks that we work together. And all of that has been a really great experience and a real learning experience from like that initial bill where we just kind of went at it alone and was not nearly as strong a bill as it should have been to work that was much more solid, just legislatively and also symbolically, I think, for the city.
Great, thank you. Sure.
Sorry, yeah.
Everybody has their own mic.
Great. Good evening. Thank you. You want to try it? Good evening.
Good
evening. Okay, so I'm Julian McClain. My pronouns are he, him. My official capacity today is one of the co-chairs of the LGBTQIA Commission and the Gender Equity Commission for the city. And we do a lot of policy and advocacy work for not only the employees, the faculty, and everyone that works for the city, but the people that inhabit the city, so our neighbors, making it more comfortable place for them. My full-time job, I am the director of Partners and Relations for Truth in Pittsburgh. So we're a environmental advocacy organization for LGBTQIA people of color. And we got our start in ballroom scenes. People are familiar with like voting, pose on, and legendary things of that nature, Madonna's song. That's where we do our events of those kinds of nature. And then the people that attended those events had some socioeconomic issues. So we created a 501c3 to kind of address housing, healthcare, food depravity, things of that nature. And so a lot of the work that I do in my perspective is looking from the bottom up from advocacy. So like when we make policy from a city perspective or a board perspective, a lot of the time it's from a bird's eye view, looking down, how can this eventually full communities in the capacity that is fair for everyone. But when policy changes made, a lot of the times they come into True Tea Store and I see people that have been let go of their job because of federal funding or that don't have housing anymore because of a policy change or because renters' rights have changed and people can displace you because of identity and there's no repercussion. And so I see those people come through our doors. And so a lot of the work, like what we were saying, why we do this is because I see firsthand the communities that we serve. And so I try to be in rooms where those policies are being made and advocate for people that don't have a voice in those situations. So a lot of the times, like even in our commission, sometimes we're like, things take a long time. And even I said that when I was first kind of to being a community member, but behind closed doors, I see like the work that it has to do to change minds or to change a policy or how many hands a bill has to go through or pass to be effectuated. And then after it is effectuated or passed, budgets have to be made and monies have to be found to actually put the programs together. So all that takes like timelines and things like that. But yeah, the people that we serve, the communities that we serve, which all of us serve, like I said, I kind of see from the bottoms up from an advocacy point of view. So yeah, I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julian. So thank you to all the panelists for being here this evening. You all were incredibly gracious in spending giving up your time to be here with us this evening. I'm going to start off with you, Chris, and talking about clarifying for attendees exactly what civil rights protections the Pittsburgh Commission on Human Relations enforces and how do they differ from being within the city limits versus stepping outside of the city of Pittsburgh.
Well, if anyone wants a sheet that has all of our protections on it, they are in the back. So I am happy to give anyone who wants one of these, but I'm not going to go over all of them because obviously we will be here. But we work in employment, we work in housing, we work in city services, and we also work in public accommodations. So public accommodations is anything that normally would be open to a member of the public, such as business or something like that. Where you would face some sort of discrimination. So to give you a bit of a rundown, the way that we enforce discrimination laws is done on a but-for basis. So you have to establish some sort of but-for connection in the event that that we're able to take a case. And so we have to be able to say that this would not have happened to someone but for the fact that they are gay, but for the fact that they are black, but for the fact that they are an immigrant. So that's how that kind of runs down according to the way that we enforce things. But I think what's most relevant to folks here tonight is, of course, that we have gender identity and gender expression protections. And we also have, why am I thinking right now? I am so sorry. We also have sexual orientation protections. So we have those explicitly in our code. It is at the state level, they protect all of that under sex, but we have those explicit protections, which is good for us, again, because the federal government is coming to redefine those things. Something I wanted to point out is that luckily, I think for a lot of us, although I do not believe this will hold for long, if the current administration in DC continues to get its way, the Trump administration kind of shot themselves in the foot when the Supreme Court revoked Chevron deference, because that means that all of their decrees and proclamations can only stay with federal enforcement. They cannot force them on anybody else. And so that's the reason why we are currently able to maintain and enforce our own laws. The worst thing that they can threaten to do is to fund us for taking cases that they don't like, which is what they are currently doing. Not fully, I should point out. It's just that they are no longer accepting. More in the past, we would have gotten reimbursed for cases that had federal protections, but also had our protections. Now they just will reimburse us for cases that have our protections, even if there are federal protections on top of that. But yeah, so that is the basis behind which that we are able to conduct investigations and help people out with that stuff. The other two things that we want to point out, which is one thing that we already mentioned, was gender affirming care protections. And we're going to talk about that a little more later, so I won't get into that right now. But the other one that, and all of these may be relevant to you in some way, but another one that I wanted to talk about that may be relevant is our survivors of domestic violence protections. I think that the way that people tend to think about that, for understandable reasons, is that it's always IPV. Our protection is not always for IPV. If you have a parent, if you have a sibling who has problems with you for whatever reason, they don't approve of your identity or anything else like that, and they come to your residence and they cause problems for you, your landlord cannot take action against you because of that. If they come to your job and cause problems for you, your employer cannot take action against you because of that. And of course, they have to be able to make certain accommodations within reason if you do find yourself in that situation. So I want everybody to be aware of that. Now we get to the question of what good are our protections outside of city limits? Unfortunately, they aren't. Now, the state does have its own set of protections and its own enforcement mechanisms. But, and this is a good time to introduce this point, the resources that go into enforcing these things is a very important matter. We are very stretched and under-resourced as it is for a commission, and we are much better off than a lot of commissions across the country. We've all, right now, my investigators each have about 30 cases. which, I don't know, that's a number that's hard to say over people's minds if you don't understand the context. But I would say the ideal is somewhere slightly south of 20. So to have that many cases, to have your mental resources that stretch, to have our ability to inform the public and inform the community of these protections. For us to not have the resources to be able to do that at all times is of course a problem. Councilmember Warwick doesn't let me hear this because you are great on everything. Truly someone who understands the problems, but when I'm faced with a lot of elected officials oftentimes, I find that a lot of folks who grew up with a lot of resources, whether that is a lot of social capital or a lot of financial capital, have a hard time imagining what it's like to be someone who is not in that situation. And a lot of folks who run for office, a lot of times they have an attorney in the family, or at the very least they have the social capital to understand how to access the legal system if they need to. And so they tend to forget, or perhaps they aren't even aware of the fact that oftentimes a lot of these laws are going to be, let me get back to that real quick, that a lot of the folks who are going to need the protection of these laws are not going to have access to an attorney. They're not going to understand how to access the legal system. And that's where enforcement agencies like mine come in. Because most of the cases that we end up taking, we do get cases from folks who have attorneys because they have to kind of nudge our process and we're good court first. But the ones that we actually end up fully investigating are for folks who don't have attorneys. And so oftentimes conceptualizing the fact that these battles are going to be fought in enforcement agencies and not in courts is difficult for a lot of elected officials. And so when you're out there talking to your elected officials, make sure that they're aware of that, and make sure that they know that, hey, we need the resources to actually enforce these laws because we're stretched, and the state commission is stretched. So, if someone does find themselves outside our jurisdiction and they have to go to the state, it's a significantly longer waiting process. They're going to get significantly less attention from their investigator than even we can provide. So that's something to keep in mind.
And I wanted to just clarify for folks, Chris, you talked about the limitations of your jurisdiction at the commission, and you just want to clarify, this is for folks who live in, work in, or are visiting the city.
Yes, yeah, sorry about that. So even if your employer is headquartered in the city of Pittsburgh, that's still potentially, and you work outside of it, that's still potentially a case that we can take, depending on circumstances. So
Good to be just aware of working, living, and or visiting. Fantastic.
Yep.
I'm going to switch gears now to you, Ian, just to talk a little bit about the current climate in the Assembly, the Pennsylvania General Assembly, and what might be some of the most critical legislative priorities that we should be focused on and should be tracking in general, or in specific.
Well, I'll start with elections have consequences, and not to go too deep into things, but in November, we're going to be re-electing the governor, which is important for passage of legislation. We're going to be re-electing the entire, I think it's 203 House members of the PA House. So that's going to be extremely important to keep a majority there. And also, we're going to be electing half of the PA Senate. So that's going to be the potential to change the balance of power there. But we won't know what that climate is going to be like until after the November election, obviously. But where we are today, at least, I was talking with people who work a little bit more in Harrisburg. There are a few bills that we have the potential to pass as it is today. One bill that could pass today is to fully legalize marriage within the state of Pennsylvania. Most of you know that federal law because of Obergefell, means that marriage equality is the law of the land. If the Supreme Court were to strike down Obergefell, for example, Pennsylvania on the books currently bans marriage equality. So there's a bill up for right now to make that, align Pennsylvania law with the Supreme Court ruling, and that could actually pass. Another thing that could actually pass is adding sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender presentation to the state hate crime bill. So we could actually see, and it seems like the stars are aligning on this. Both bill to add that to hate crime legislation and money to train police on how to investigate hate crimes. So that's something that could be statewide. It could happen. Things that are less likely to happen though. For example, there are multiple bills attacking trans people in sports. I think we all know those are there. With the current composition of our government, those aren't going to pass, at least not entirely. But people are still making plays for them. I think there are like 4. I mean, like, how many do they need? It's like the zombie that keeps coming back. And then also there's a Senate bill to prohibit state funds for gender-affirming care, which again, the Senate can keep him and haw, but at least with the current composition of our government, it's not going anywhere. Things that could go somewhere if the composition of the government changes in a positive direction for us, so to speak. So things that are being developed in terms of legislation but won't be passing anytime soon. Many of you might have heard that the Fairness Act passed the last session. So the Fairness Act would add things like LGBT, sexual orientation, and gender presentation to the state's Human Rights Commission. So what you do only on the statewide level, currently, as we just covered, there is no gender identity and sexual orientation on statewide level for the Fairness Act to fix that. It's not going to pass the Senate just yet. They won't bring it up for a vote, but that's something that could happen if things change. Another thing that could change is decriminalizing HIV status and sentencing. Right now, in certain cases, if you're HIV positive, you can get a charge up to a felony charge, which that doesn't seem fair to me, but that's the state we're living in right now, but we have the potential to change it. Another thing that's cooking right now is banning the LGBTQ panic defense. So that's actually like a legal defense bill that you could say, hey, I panicked because they're gay, I panicked because they're trans. And that's a legal defense? I mean, come on. I don't know what's wrong with these people. Another thing that's cooking right now is reform to Pennsylvania's name change legislation, which who here changed their name? Hands? So you have to put your name in 2 like newspapers or get that exempted right now. And newspapers, they're looking to get rid of that requirement. So in the future, and in Allegheny County, and if you have a good judge, you can get that waived. But to have uniformly across the state that you don't have to put that you're changing your name like you're some sort of criminal in the paper, that it would be important for a law of accessibility across the Commonwealth. There's also they also want to close the loophole for LGBTQ people in housing, so to stop non-discrimination. There's an anti-bullying law or anti-bullying bill to add LGBTQ protections to anti-bullying bills, and also put non-discrimination into our adoption laws. So right now our laws are, I mean, it depends on where you live, because Pennsylvania is so varied in terms of its laws. Some places could discriminate against you for being LGBTQ, in terms of adoption. So, we're looking to change that. So those are like the high level ones. So I hope that answers your question.
Absolutely, thank you, appreciate that. I am going to now punt my next question over to one of the two of you on the Mayor's Commission. I'd really love to, maybe both of you could answer this, if you both have specific initiatives you want to talk about, but I want to talk about what the city of Pittsburgh is currently undertaking to enhance the safety and public just visibility of marginalized communities in our neighborhoods. Can you talk maybe to what some of you all are doing, or maybe discussing on the commission?
Yeah, perfect. So a big part of what we're doing is making sure that visibility and advocacy are on the forefront of kind of the programs that we're putting out. So we're planning Outfest, which is in its second year, which is October 11th is the weekend, because October 11th is National Coming Out Day. And so the city and the mayor's office definitely wanted visibility in that respect, to make sure that people that are coming out are wanting to showcase a deeper identity, or identity that they haven't gotten a chance to showcase yet. It's put to the forefront, making sure that SOGI trainings return to city employees, and those are identity affirming trainings, so people just kind of have a better idea of how to interact with one another. Bathroom changes, so making sure that there's non-gendered access to different restrooms, and relieving yourself getting to those restrooms. So like those SOGI trainings, like a receptionist or a security guard could effectuate how you use a restroom, just getting to changing a placard on the door may not just be enough. So if you want to go to City Hall, maybe getting through some other boundaries and hurdles need to be addressed as well. So make sure that we address those things. And then just making sure like public comment and stuff like that is accessible at our meetings. Working with the police, Chief Lando is our direct police liaison. So anything that we need, like those raids in P-Town, but yeah, we had a discrepancy. So we have direct access to Chief Lando and the city police, and even that, like recruiting efforts for the police, Chief Lando wanted me to say this as well. So they're recruiting more queer identity, LGBTQIA identity people that want to be represented on the police force. He wants to be represented on the police force. So he wants to make sure that the metrics that the city meet the metrics of the police force, identity-wise. So there should be more people of color, there should be more queer people, there should be more women, there should be, yeah. So, but yeah, working on a couple of those things. I know that working with city council in last year, we passed a couple of bills that were identity affirming, and I don't know if you want to, so that's the meetings.
Can everybody hear me? Okay. I want to switch gears just a little bit toward more of an aspirational question, and any one of you can start us off and we can continue from there. But I'm really curious about the fact that those of us who are living in Pittsburgh are somewhat charmed by having these protective, pieces in place. It also does not have the same chilling effect that living just outside of the city boundaries creates. But also, those of us who live in the city but want to go to someplace and enjoy that space outside within Allegheny County or the 5-county region, that kind of thing. All of a sudden, there is a chilling effect for those of us who have rights when they're in the city, and all of a sudden start losing rights as they start stepping outside of the city boundaries. What can we do, both as LGBTQIA plus citizens, and as LGBTQIA plus leaders here in the room, what can we do to help expand that patchwork of protections? Who wants to maybe talk through some of those things? Steve, you want to kick us off?
Very, very simple. Run for office. No, but I mean it. I think in the past, 20, 30 years ago, it was easy to say that I'm going to move to the city and I'll be protected there. Now young people, they don't have the money to move to the city. Gentrification is forcing people out, and you shouldn't be dependent on where you live so that you have rights. But any place that you live, there's a desperate need for public service. Almost anywhere. We have all these different townships, boroughs, municipalities across Allegheny County, Southwest PA, and all of them need leaders to step up. We need to be encouraging LGBTQ people, and in particular LGBTQ youth, and finding ways to support them to step up, be on their town council, and help pass that patchwork of ordinances that we need for these protections. Because it's great to say that we'll just come in at the state level and that be that. But the way Pennsylvania works, it's very bottom up. We need a critical mass of municipalities across the entire state to stand up and say we all collectively want this. And to do that, we need to put time, treasure, and talent behind LGBTQ leaders running for local offices.
I think too, to add on to that, is to remember in whatever community you're working in, to make sure to build solidarity with other people doing similar work, right? So we get very siloed, even in the social justice world, right? But it is very important to remember that, LGBTQIA plus rights and housing justice and transit justice and food justice and all of these things, it is all one and the same, and that we are stronger together. So in whatever community you are in, find those organizers and learn about what they're doing and join all the groups and show up for their actions, because if you show up for their actions, they show up for yours, right? And that is how you build solidarity. And whatever it may be, if it's coming down to your county council and having 50 people show up to public testimony, or if it's meeting with an individual member. And one thing that I always say to folks, no matter what the issue is, because I noticed this when I became an elected official, they shouldn't make you lobby. They shouldn't make you, so much of the time, folks will come and they'll want to do good legislation, and you feel the nervousness when they're sitting down in the meeting, because they're like, okay, is this person going to listen to me? Are they actually going to take this thing and go with it? And so much of the time, it's very easy to show up to Pride as an elected official, let me tell you, right? It's easy to show up to Pride and be like, yay, and take a photo. It's a very different thing to have someone come into your office and be like, here's a problem, and say, and rather than make them come and ask again and again, or show up with 20 people and ask again, just do it, right? And if your elected officials aren't doing that, then, as Ian said, maybe you should run for that seat yourself, or identify somebody in the broader activist community where you are to do so.
And then just to add on silos, like how important it is to get involved locally, just as an activist yourself, but I think geographically, as policymakers and advocates, from a policymaking standpoint, we work geographically in silos. And so I think that our commission really wants to talk to Governor Shapiro's on the Governor's Commission a lot more and see where some of those rights and to your question, when you leave the city, how can you be protected, knowing where those holes are, what has been working for Pittsburgh, but it may also work for Erie, it may also work for Harrisburg, which may also work for the Poconos, which may also work for Philadelphia. So making sure that we're speaking to each other, because I think that sometimes that we're just just make sure what works for Pittsburgh. But we could be talking about what's working for Pennsylvanians, could be a larger conversation. So our commission definitely wants to talk to the Governor's Commission more.
Yeah, so I'm just gonna guess and everybody else here. As important, representation is great. As if not more important than representation is visibility. Make it so that they can't ignore you. And that's, I think that is oftentimes where a lot of this ends up failing, is that, you know, the elections are important. We want to get elected officials in there. I've been doing this for my entire adult life, and I have seen far too many times when a campaign wins, they throw their hands up in the air and they say, "We did it!" You are starting the journey. You have started the journey. You have not finished it. The journey is everything that you're going to have to do to get the power, to pass the laws, to build the protections, to get the political power that you need, and be able to exercise it in the way that you need to be able to exercise it to get what you want. And as everyone else here said, that is about getting together, organizing, agitating, finding common ground with people out there that you may not believe before that you had common ground with, or may not have thought before that there were other people out there who had similar interests out there. And so I think that's the thing, that's the key, is to remain visible and to stay focused on the fact that it's I hate to say this, but it is a struggle. It's a struggle every day. You're going to have to get out there every day, not literally every day. You know, you can take a rest, but like you're going to have to have that everyday mindset that this is a gargantuan, titanic clash between different forces that are out there to control the public resources and to control public opinion, and you have to be willing to face that and accept that and go out there and win it.
So we are running close to time, so I want to end with a question regarding healthcare and gender-affirming care. We have not just Outfest happening in October, but we also have the Trans Pride United Health and Wellness Conference that happens in October. And with that in mind, what is the current legal status of gender-affirming care protections in Pennsylvania? And what can local leaders, activists, and citizens do to ensure that healthcare access both is restored and remains a safe way to access it? I'll start with you, Chris, and then we can make our way on to anyone else who wants to comment.
Well, so locally, as Barbara said, we had worked together to pass the gender-affirming care protections. So I want to take a moment to talk about what that is, how it's structured, and sort of status-wise where it is in de facto and and sort of in the ideal. And so when we were working together, as I said up at the top, all of our laws are enforceable through their structuring as a but-for proposition. So, you would not have treated this person differently but for the fact of X, Y, and Z. And so when we're working on this, every treatment that is out there for gender-affirming care is out there for somebody else. Breast reduction, breast augmentation, hair removal, hormonal therapy. I have a friend who has a little boy who they went to the doctor, and the doctor said, your kid's arms are about half of a centimeter too short for the height of where he is at right now. I would like to put him on hormonal therapy so that way he can grow his arms out. And I'm like, so they're willing to do that, but they're not willing to do the other things. But all of that care is out there for somebody else. And our law says that if you're offering that care to somebody else, you cannot refuse somebody that care just because they are, or you suspect that they are transgender. Simple as that. We have gotten, I think, about half a dozen inquiries, but we have not had anybody who has been willing to go forward to use our law to challenge UPMC or any other medical entity out there. And I think part of that is a little bit of misunderstanding. Part of that is the fact, and I'll get to the misunderstanding in a moment, but I think this is actually the more important fact. I think part of that is because I will be straight up with people. I want them to know all the facts. When people come to me, I don't see an opportunity for a case. I see a person. And seeing a person, I have to tell them, yes, this will be public. Yes, your child's name or your name will be public. So that's going to be a simple fact of the matter. And I think that deters a lot of people understandably so. So when the day comes, hopefully at some point, we will get somebody who actually wants to go forward. Then of course we have to test this law. So we go through the entire process and we measure everything fairly as we will with any other case, look at the facts. If we determined that there was probable cause to go ahead, if we had a public hearing and determined that guilt's not a word that we actually use in our process, but for simplicity's sake, there was a guilty party here, then there's a 100% chance that's going to be taken to state or federal court. Court goes from there. I'm willing to have that fight. Too often I have to talk to people who are like, yeah, but if we try to go for this or try to go for that, it's going to be challenged in court. And my response to that is always make them tell us no. Have the fight, because if you don't have the fight, then you didn't do anything. You didn't build any momentum. You didn't get people behind the cause. You didn't raise awareness of the issue. So let's have this fight. Make them tell us no. Make them tell us you cannot do this, and then people all over the state will be asking, why can't they do this? And then maybe we can actually get some changes. So when the day comes, I'm willing to have that fight. I do think also, though, that there is a bit of a misunderstanding, because I am aware that there are things that have gone to state agencies regarding UPMC. And I think that there is a bit of a misunderstanding that people assume that because they are the state, they have more authority to carry this case forward than we do. But these protections don't exist at the state level, number one. And so they would have to be kind of fashioned out of the laws that exist and hope that the Supreme Court, state Supreme Court kind of sees it their way. But as we're finding out, that may be changing soon. But whereas it's very explicitly in our code that you have these protections. But also, as I said, the state Human Relations Commission is very strained for resources right now, and they're actually undergoing a major reorganization. And just because we're local doesn't mean that we can't do something. And so I think that's the other thing that's kind of blocked us from being able to carry this forward. But when the time comes, we're ready. So talk to some folks.
Great. Ian, final comment on this question. Go for it.
Sorry, I just wanted to take a small detour on the question. I'm not fully briefed. I saw earlier this week that there was some kind of ruling that the federal government could not take away the Medicare and Medicaid money from UPMC and Children's Hospital of Philadelphia for providing gender-affirming care. There's some kind of ruling earlier this week that they were not allowed to go through on that threat. So I think there's still fallout coming on this question, because if the federal government does have the right to take away the money, that was the predication of why UPMC, as well as other agencies that I won't name, withdrew federal gender-affirming care. So I think there's more to come on this.
Fantastic. Thanks for the color. All right, I am going to now switch it to your audience questions. We have a few audience questions. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask the question, and then one of you is going to be I was going to say sucker, but the opportunist to go ahead and answer these questions. So the first one is says that many Latino LGBTQ+ individuals navigate challenges related to culture, language, immigration status, and identity. What steps are local organizations and government agencies taking to ensure these community members have equal access to resources, legal protection, and services in both English and in Spanish?
So like you're kind of saying, like a lot of people rely on third-party spaces, community organizations, grassroots organizers, their neighbors, their churches, and spaces like Casa San Jose is a great organization that works specifically with Latin. I don't know if Latinx is politically correct, so I won't say that. So Latin people, great, okay. So Latin people, but they do really good work with immigration, questions about ICE. I know that there's a ICE headquarters on the south side, and they do a lot of advocacy work with people that get arrested in custody there, LGBTQIA rights, housing rights, but they're kind of like a one-stop shop for anyone in the Latin community that is looking for resources of that nature. Constantly, San Jose.
I think probably whoever asked that question that might know that Philadelphia has a large Latino community. So one thing that we do always ask here locally is of our state reps, what are you doing to help integrate and provide services to the Latino community? As with a lot of things, Representative Jeff Benham, who represents an area with a heavy Latino population, is wonderful at making sure that there is accessibility to all state services in Spanish. Also, I think that a lot of things are offered in Chinese as well, but like there's definitely everything in Spanish.
Great, thank you. Okay.
I just wanted to, just so everyone is aware, we at the commission have interpretation services for multiple different languages. So if you know anybody who needs that service and is not contacting us because they're worried about any translation issues, we can handle that. So
Free?
yes.
Awesome.
Great. All right, our next and final question is in regards to the new vague / broad domestic terror definitions, domestic terror is in quotations. Is there currently any existing protections or are there new protections on the horizon for trans folks and allies who may be targeted by this?
I think that is where, if this, well, I can speak to the city of Pittsburgh, but if other folks have more information on the state. But at the city, again, we're very, we are preempted by state law, by federal law. But again, what we can do at the city of Pittsburgh is direct what our law enforcement officers can and can't do, right? And that is also the same at the county. In that type of a case, and that is just the type of thing that we're talking about with the bill to deprioritize identity-based criminalization of residents, right? Is to say, look, they can say, they can make it the law at the federal level, they can, but now we can't stop federal agents from coming. We saw the same issue around ICE protections, right? That's another piece of legislation that we passed is banning cooperation with ICE. So, but what we can do is make sure that our Pittsburgh police officers do not cooperate, do not hand over any information, right? About so like if there are federal agents, I'm sort of in this dystopian, like worst case, that there's federal agents looking for someone, they've classified trans people as domestic terrorists. Our police officers would not be authorized to, ask for that information or hand somebody over or anything of that nature. And then also that when it comes to what we prioritize, what our law enforcement officer, we would just sort of ignore that, right? We put them at the very bottom of the list, right? Like, we have limited resources, and what are our officers going to focus on? They're going to focus on, violent crime. And that's sort of where it is, and that's what those kind of preemptive decriminalization ordinances do.
And yeah, I think that hate crimes and identity-based crimes are notoriously hard to kind of convict and prove. And so sometimes I think that when community raises these questions, it's a good question to take back to commissions and to city representation so we can get a more clear answer on what a hate crime or what an identity crime actually means and looks like. And specifically in their terms, what does protections look like? If someone says to you that I feel as though they did it because I'm trans, I've had situations with police, I felt like it was because I'm gay, and they disband that as we can't prove that. So there's nothing we can do about that. So someone, even if they say slur or something like that, even in those situations, it's hard to convict or hard to charge people with hate crimes. So when asking for protections around specifically my identity and how do I know, how can I charge someone or be protected with my identity from someone attacking me for my identity is a great question for us to kind of get clarification on as well. So I don't want to just take up the time, but I think that it merits a good question and something that I have questions about. So how can we more effectively, this is something that we need to talk to Chief Landau about, how can we more effectively make sure that people know how their identity affects how they're treated and how they can, navigate the criminal system.
A lot of folks always focus on the police bureau, but I am much more interested also in having that conversation with our fire chief or our new interim fire chief, as well as EMS and so forth, because queer people come into contact with all kinds of services throughout the city. And in those emergency moments, you want to make sure that you are being cared for in an affirming way, as opposed to someone who is going to be disaffirming and potentially, it's loss of life. But if not, there's trauma involved in all of these things. So, I hope that as we have more conversations, the Pittsburgh Equality Center and all of you here on the panel, but also folks here, is that we talk about all of those services, making sure that we are creating an environment where LGBTQIA plus people can call 911, call the non-emergency line, and always be supported in a way that helps them resolve situations without loss of life and without trauma. And so I want to first thank all of you for being here this evening with us. Round of applause, folks, for the panelists. They all gave time out of their busy work and the really important work that they do to be here this evening. And so I really thank them on behalf of Pittsburgh Equality Center. I also wanted to note that we have Dreams of Hope here, who does queer youth arts. They are tabling, so feel free to talk to Hannah over here and enjoy some of her squeaky toys and other giveaways. And with that, again, like I said, there are some treats in the back. Please take the treats, take them home, give them to somebody. Feel free to network, enjoy the rest of the evening. And thank you all for coming out to this LGBTQ+ Civil Rights Town Hall. Have a great evening.